right? So how does this look, right? I buy a property. I'm renting it to a guy. If he doesn't close on it, I own the property. Well, he didn't close on it because he died.
Today's episode is part of our Landlord Chronicles series, where we hear from amazing landlords about their most interesting landlording story, along with a lesson to help you invest better. Dan, I'm curious. You've obviously like bird and done a bunch of unique transactions. I'm curious if you have like a Burr story that's like especially unique, something that a strange house or a strange situation, some kind of property that, I don't know. I think that like a lot of investors have that property. They're kind of like, oh man, that was a crazy story. Something that was a little unique. Anything come to mind?
I think we've all had nightmare stories with it, right? I've had my home runs, unfortunately on social media, everyone puts out, and back to what Joel said with being vulnerable and social media, you got to be careful because everyone puts out their home runs, right? And I think the thing that's people like, Dan, how is your social media so good? Because I do it all myself, right? And I'm going to get back to the Burr story, but Joel mentioned that, and you just mentioned it. People don't care about how good you are, right? They really don't give a crap about you. That's the pure honesty. I'll tell people that. If you put out a post, how I made $1 million, you'll get 1 or 2 likes, maybe a comment, great job, maybe a fist emoji, right? You put out a post of how I screwed this deal up or how I screwed up in life, and I'll get hundreds of comments, likes, shares, and it makes people more know, like, and trust you, right? Because they want to feel like you, right? They're hurting behind the screen. What they put out there is totally different, right? So Joel mentioned that, and I appreciate you doing that, Joel, too. And that's why I put out my real story. But yeah, I had a story. In fact, somebody else just wants to interview me about my horror story of rentals, right? And I'm going to tell them this story too. I got into a Burr product, a Burr deal years ago when I was in New York. And I hope I can even talk about this now. I don't want anyone knocking at my door. But I bought this property from a guy who was going downhill. Like really going downhill. Typical, bought it from a seller. I literally bought it for about 20 cents on the dollar, the property. And I allowed him to.
Where's the property? This is in New York City?
This was in New York, right? In Staten Island, New York. I allowed him to live in the property and pay rent at the time. And so he was paying rent, and the goal was he was going to buy the property back, which probably should not be done. You should not do deals this way, which I learned afterwards. Okay, because if you put somebody in a property and they're supposed to buy it back and they don't buy it back and you have to evict them, did you really underwrite them the right way? Back then, it was before Dodd-Frank and all of this, right? So he was supposed to buy the property back. Well, apparently he was down and out because he was into drugs. Well, he messed with the wrong people and he got himself killed. Enough that it was in the newspapers and on the news that the FBI was involved. So I'm now living in Delaware and I got a knock on my door from the FBI.
Whoa.
Right. So how does this look, right? I buy a property. I'm renting it to a guy. If he doesn't close on it, I own the property. Well, he didn't close on it because he died. It took me 9 months to evict a dead man, right? 9 months, because we couldn't find him. I had no idea where he was. He was dead. 2 years later, I got a knock on my door about this, and they're asking me like if I was involved, like basically almost accusing me of being involved in this. I said, do you realize how much money I would make if this person actually bought the property back from me? I lost money on this deal, and I had to now get a lawyer. I had to now not defend. I didn't go through anything because they had nothing. I had all the paperwork. I showed them everything, but I had to deal with about 4 hours of questioning for a guy who was killed, and I'm looking for him to pay my rent, and I'm trying to evict a dead guy. So yeah, you go through this, right? So I could put out my stories of how I.
So the guy dies, and you don't even know he's.
I had no idea. He's just not returning anything. Like, and New York was hard to evict. No returns. Service. Mail sent by an attorney. Waiting for a court date, doesn't show up to the first court date. They give us 2 more court dates. The guy doesn't show up. He's dead. 2 years later, I get a knock on my door from the feds. asking me questions. And I'll pay $5,000 for an attorney to answer these questions. And I'm like, I'm just a real estate investor. That's all I am, is a real estate investor. So if you haven't gone through stuff like this yet, you're not a real estate investor, right? They say if you're a motorcycle rider, right? I went down in an accident. They said if you didn't have an accident, you're not a motorcycle rider. So I went through that. Now I could also tell you the great stories where I bought a property for $15,000 in a short sale worth $160,000, and I only put $25,000 into it, and I refied out, cashed out on the thing at 75% when the rates were in the fours. I can tell you that story. That was more than a home run. That was like 5 grand slams at one deal, right? And the rent on that property is almost $2,000 a month. So I can tell you about that story. That's the home run deals. But yeah, we all have those nightmare stories. Believe me, we all have the nightmare stories. I have more nightmares than I care to share. But I tell those nightmare stories because I want to teach other people how to protect themselves. And I'm sure Joel and Chad, I'm sure you guys have a ton of nightmare stories. And I always, when people say, what does it cost to learn from you? And I say, it's going to be a lot cheaper than trying to evict a tenant that's dead for 9 months, right? How do you protect yourself against these things? So there's a lot of stories that if I can go back, and I'm sure you two have the same thing. If you can go back.
So will you now not? So you buy, I'm sure that happens a lot, right? You buy a home from someone who's done.
Oh, nobody's died. Nobody else has been killed in my properties. One and done.
But I'm curious. I'm sure it happens a lot where you buy that property from someone who's down their luck. They don't want to leave. They want to just rent it back. Do you now kind of say like, no, like I'm not interested in renting back to that person? Because I mean, the odds must be pretty, they're not great. It
really almost becomes a conflict of interest. All right. So I just say no. What I would do is I'll give them, because I want to listen, once again, I'll say I'm blessed in this business. If I could help somebody else out, I would love to. And when I meet with sellers, because I still love to meet with sellers, and I don't meet with a lot of them, but I get referrals, and I personally meet with people. I get referrals for where I live. And I just had it happen to me. I just had a lady who spoke to me. She was going to foreclosure on a Tuesday. I got a call on a Friday. I'm making her an offer on the phone. And I said, listen, we need to stop this auction. And her husband, they're getting divorced. The husband is not cooperating with her. The house is in both of their names. The mortgage is in his name. He's not cooperating. I give him an offer way more than I should have gave him because I wanted to make sure they had enough rent for the next year, right? And her husband apparently was getting more money. Well, on Monday at about 4:00 she calls me and she goes, he can't get the deal done. We're going to lose the house tomorrow. So I'm like, here's my offer. Here's my proof of funds. Send it to the bank. Too late. Bank said it's too late. We're within 24 hours. We're going to auction. She lost her house. So what I was going to do is I was going to give her $20,000 extra. More. First of all, I should have paid. I still remember the number's about 139 max on the house. I offered them once. I was going to pay off all their debt, and I was offering them 179 on it. All right, so they were going to get $20,000 to make sure that they can go pay rent. But yeah, I don't let anyone stay in the house anymore. It's a conflict of interest because if you have to evict them, it could look like you stole the house from them almost. All right, so your best bet is just path of least resistance. But still, if you want to take care of them, take care of them. By all means, if there's enough money in the deal or it's in your heart to do it, give them $10,000 moving costs, give them a couple thousand, whatever it might take to help them. I don't even care if you put them in another house, but it's just really is a conflict. My attorney at the time said it's a conflict of interest because, they could say they didn't understand. And it doesn't look good. Even though you're covered legally, it just doesn't look good. And you don't ever want to look that way. So if it's on your heart to help somebody, help them, but just do it the right way.
2 of my worst stories are exactly what you're describing. And my policy now is 100% you cannot stay. I will do what it takes to help you transition so that, you're stable. It might cost a few extra dollars as you're describing, but this way I don't run into a problem. They're stable. And there's no recourse to come back. And I think that's really crucial as you invest and move forward and build your portfolio, not to leave yourself susceptible like that. Standing in front of a judge and having somebody claim they didn't understand, this is my home, Your Honor, that is not a place you want to be.
Especially in the state you're in. And that's why it's so important that we all have like podcasts like you guys are putting on right now, because you're giving this information out. I didn't have that. If I would have heard this back then, I would have never let that deal go on when the guy got killed. I would have said, listen, I'll do the house. You can move. If you ever have the chance to buy it back, come to me. I'm not going to guarantee I'll sell it to you, but listen, I'm willing to sell it. If you can buy it, I'll sell it at that time if you really want the house that bad. But if I would have heard this podcast back 20 something years ago, it would have saved me a lot of nightmare and headache. And that's why mentorship from the right people who are doing exactly what you want to do is so important. And I'm not saying it because I really don't mentor people that much anymore, right? But there are a lot of mentors out there that'll do it. I do one-day mentorships, right? I'll meet with somebody for one day. I'll go through my whole business plan. I'll work their business plan. I'll help them out. I do that twice a month. But long-term mentorships, I don't really do that anymore. But it's so important to learn. There's so much valuable information. And that's why Joel and myself and Chad, if we put this out there vulnerably, how we screwed the deals up, it helps people. Nobody cares that we made $1 million on a deal. They can care less. They care that, oh, crap, I'm in that same situation. How can you help me, Joel? How can you help me, Chad? And that's why it's important to be vulnerable out there.
That makes you
man, it's awesome. I really like it. I'm curious. I got to ask, when the FBI is knocking on your door, I mean, literally the FBI.
Yes.
I just got what's going through your head? I mean, you've spent a lifetime in real estate.
Sure.
What?
I had no idea why they were knocking. First of all, they came up. I had no idea where they were knocking. I still remember the day. It was like yesterday. My friend came to visit me. I was in Delaware from New York. He came with his daughter to visit me. I'm literally sitting out in my dining room with them for 4 hours while him and his daughter are there with my daughter. And I'm like, and then they start asking me questions, and they act like your friends up front. Nothing's wrong. And then all of a sudden it's 2 minutes later, they're like thinking you did something. I'm like, I don't even have like a park. Like if I got a parking ticket, I'm scared to death. Like you're talking about an ex-cop and you know, I mean, like they don't get it. Like it's just to them, it's black and white. It's really like this black and white. They don't get it. Like if they look at the whole deal, I made so much more money if the guy would have bought the deal from me the way he was supposed, at the price he was supposed to buy it back from me. I lost so much money by him getting killed. Right. So I'm like, why in the world? Like, it doesn't make sense. They don't get it. And I keep trying to explain, and they don't understand even how I get, like, they don't understand the basis. How do you buy a house so cheap? Are you strong arming somebody to get so cheap? They don't get this concept because they're in their singular views of, and that's how the world is, right? We were talking about like a little bit about Robert Kiyosaki before, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The Poor Dad views it so singular, right? Work, save money, retire, get a pension, and die, right? They don't think of anything other than you can't buy a house. How are you buying a house at, $15,000 that's worth way more? Are you stealing from somebody? How do you do that? Even private lenders don't understand that. So you got to kind of teach them how you do that stuff. And once you get out of your own way and you realize that this can be done, there's a process to do it. There are people who know how to do this. They will teach you, but you have to invest in yourself, right? And when somebody has 10, 15, 20, 33 years experience, it's worth the investment in yourself, right? Because I'm going to stop you from hitting those roadblocks that you're going to hit, because I'm going to show you, hey, these deals. And I meet with a lot of, now I coach a lot of groups, real estate investor groups that they do a lot of business. And most of them are very transactional, and they don't understand the biggest things. They don't understand seller financing. Okay. So they bring me in for that. They don't understand how to do it. They're very transactional. And now they're seeing, especially with Burr, they're seeing the issue now with the interest rates. So like, oh crap, we've been living high in the hog for the last couple of years. Now what do? We have no passive income really coming in. So you have a lot of the people out there right now that can help you. But yeah, that's not a deal you ever want to do. You don't ever want the feds knocking at your door. Especially, it's like getting in trouble for doing nothing wrong. You ever get in trouble for your wife for doing nothing wrong? It's the worst feeling in the world, because it's like try to defend yourself when you do nothing wrong. And it's like, man, how are you even, like, I'm the most squeaky clean. Like, how are you even messing with me? Like, do you get it? So that's just one of many. Man, I paid contractors for work not done. They were taking pictures of other houses. And I've screwed up so many times, but by screwing up, you don't quit. You just put people, processes, and systems in place to learn from them. But if I had a mentor to show me how to do these back almost 30 years ago, I would have never, ever done that. I would have never done that. Now I have processes, very easy processes, to help from screwing that up. Right? Third-party processes that nobody could really screw me over. But you don't know that. If you get in this business and you look at what everyone puts on social media, make $1 million, in a month, and you just follow them, buy their course, and you start jumping in and taking these, get rich quick schemes or lose 100-pound quick schemes, and nothing. Listen, I heard something very, very, very powerful today from Darren Hardy. He said, nothing great comes from anything without hardship, right? To win, you have to feel what it's like to lose, right? So if everyone won, there would be nothing great about winning. You got to feel what it's like to lose. And man, Joel probably too. We've lost plenty of times. Yep. And I share those out there because I'm not about building my ego on social media. I'm about teaching you that I'm not perfect. I mean, Drew, I ran my webinar yesterday. Technology was all screwed up because my tech guy couldn't make it. So he had a family issue. So I'm running tech on different machines on an iPad, trying to do the whiteboard on the iPad. It's not working. My slides aren't working. People were thanking me up and down. They're like, the tech was a problem in the beginning. You went with it. That's why we love you. Because people don't care if you're perfect. Imperfect action is so much better than perfect. Everyone, you guys waited. You just said how many years to do a podcast? You're probably like, oh, we need a logo. We need a name. We need this. We need that. Just get started. Who cares? Who cares? People like imperfect.
It's funny, Dan. I always tell a story. I say, imagine you're in a restaurant and the food comes out and the food's cold and the server kind of screwed up, right? And imagine two servers. Imagine one of those servers is out, like they screwed up because they were out smoking a cigarette. And you kind of saw them smoking a cigarette. And then the food comes out. And the other server is just busting their ass. And they're running around like crazy, right? And the food comes out cold and they apologize. You don't get mad. Do you really get mad at the server who was busting their ass? Not really, right? Like, you actually have a lot of compassion. And I've seen a lot of those servers end up getting great tips because you feel bad for the person. They feel bad. They're kind of like putting their heart in their sleeve. And I think that's the difference. It's like if your heart's in the right place and you work hard, you're not trying to screw people over. You're not just smoking a cigarette, taking a 10-minute break, but you're doing the right thing. You're going to make mistakes. I find that those people end up so much further ahead because the mistakes are, I don't know, people just, they're more willing to work through the mistakes with them. And when people are honest and say, look, man, I screwed up here. I was working hard. I was juggling too much. It seems like people are much more compassionate about those kinds of examples.
I think we all appreciate people who put in effort and show that consistent and try. And you can see they're pushing themselves to try to help you as well. And I think we appreciate people like that.
Thanks for listening to this edition of the Real Estate Hackers Show. If you've not yet become a member of Real Estate Hackers, you can do that for free at realestatehackers.com. Get access to all of the amazing real estate hacker deals from incredible vendors, on a ton of content and materials for you, the investor. You can follow Real Estate Hackers on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. If you can give us a 5-star review for the podcast, I would personally really appreciate it. We read every review, and thank you so much for helping us grow this community for you, the real estate investor.